The computer of the future will be as portable as your watch, as personal as your wallet. It'll recognize speech. It just might not do Windows. You can't really say that Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or whatever need billions and billions of dollars to motivate them to go to the office and pursue the expansion of Google. That's wrong on its surface. Money in capitalism doesn't go to people who spend it best. It goes to people who can expand it best. The biggest industry in the world is not food or transportation or housing. The biggest industry in the world is currency trading, because governments have persuaded themselves that one of their greatest powers is just to print money. And if governments can print money, money really doesn't mean anything. Blockchain is sometimes called a unity. It's a single technology that addresses a set of serious global crises. Two most serious ones, I think, is the collapse of internet security. The other great hacking scandal in the world is the scandal of money. Money has to reveal prices, not set prices.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is George Gilder is one of the smartest men I have ever met. For the past 4 decades, he's been talking about economics, political policy. He wrote speeches for President Nixon, and Ronald Reagan quoted his book, Wealth and Poverty, more than any single source. And now he's back with a brand new book called Life After Google that's talking about the future, talking about 5G, the singularity, and more importantly, cryptocurrency and what it means for all of us. I'm telling you, sitting down with George was like being in a time machine and really accessing so much information and just a wealth of knowledge. And I know you're going to enjoy this incredible episode with George Gilder. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is George Gilder, the American investor, writer, economist, and techno-utopian advocate. For the past 4 decades, you've written extensively about technology's key creative role in economic growth and prosperity. Your 1981 best-selling book, Wealth and Poverty, was the most quoted book by Ronald Reagan and defined the economic revolution of his presidency. You're a Forbes magazine contributing editor, and you've written for The Economist, the Harvard Business Review, and the Wall Street Journal. Your latest book, Life After Google, describes a future internet armed with a unique cryptocurrency transaction layer that will provide a new standard for global money. George, welcome to London Real.
Great to be here.
It's great to have you here. First of all, before we get started, I just wanted to let people know we just finished recording a separate video that's not going to be on YouTube, that's all about the internet reboot and some very special investment situations in the 5G space and others. People can click the link below or go to londonreal.tv/reboot to get that free report. I highly recommend that people do that because you have some very interesting takes on some of these companies and technologies. You know, before we get started, George, I wanted to ask you about London. What does this city mean to you? What's it like when you come here? Do you remember the first time you came here? And how's it different than the States?
Well, I love London. I Isaac Newton was the master of the mint in London, and lots of people focus on his transformation of physics. But I think his greatest contribution historically was the gold standard. Isaac Newton engineered the gold standard, and most histories of Newton also pretend that the end of his life was sort of wasted, that he spent it doing alchemy. But what he was doing was trying to hack gold. He thought if gold could be demonstrated to be unhackable, then it could be the foundation for a global money, and it could underlie the British Empire. And so what most people thought was a waste of time by Newton was actually critical to 200 years of the greatest prosperity in the history of the human race. And not only did he provide the physics that underlaid the Industrial Revolution, he also provided the monetary structure. And I think today we're in a similar Newtonian moment where blockchain can not only provide the basis for a secure internet for the first time, but also the basis for unhackable money around the world. Now we have a double hacking crisis. The internet's hacked billions of times. And money is being hacked constantly by central bankers around the world. And so I think I'm glad to be in London for a new Newtonian moment.
I love it. And I've seen where he's buried in Westminster Abbey. And I never thought of him as kind of an economist as well. Yeah. But it's great that you say that. And maybe we can get back to the gold standard at some point. Yeah. Just to give people some context, if they don't know already, and I'm sure you've heard this quote, but I'm going to have to say it again. But in your book, Life After Television, which was published over 25 years ago, you said this.
You want me to do it?
Yeah, go ahead.
The computer of the future will be as portable as your watch, as personal as your wallet. It'll recognize speech. It'll navigate streets. It will collect your news and your mail. It just might not do Windows, Microsoft Windows, but it'll do doors, open doors to your future. And Steve Jobs took this book and distributed it to his colleagues, I learned recently. And Ari Emanuel read it. And this results in the current Vanity Fair calls me the original gangster futurist of Hollywood, who inspired Ari Emanuel to become the world super agent. So I'm that Life After Television was an important book, and Life After Google, I hope, will be equally important.
That's incredible. And the more I learn about you, the more I'm kind of blown away with how your mind works to see these things. How do you see something like that way before it even happens?
Because I studied the microchip. I mean, it was really an insight that came from my decision after writing Wealth and Poverty. It sold millions of copies around the world. It was the #1 book in France for 6 months. It was really a global bestseller. And it captivated the Reagan cabinet and Ronald Reagan himself. And I thought I'd done it. So I'd done economics, and now I was going to do technology. And I decided that the most important event in the world was the creation of the integrated circuit. It just seemed to me that the transformation of technology from being pushing and pulling materials from the outside, like applying forces to material entities from the outside, had given way to the internal manipulation of matter. And that this opened horizons of new technology that were really unlimited. And the microchip summed it up. And so I wrote a book about the microchip. And once you really understood the microchip, you could see that it had really no obvious limits, and that it would transform all technologies. And certainly anything that could be created in a giant computer could also be created in a handheld device or a watch-sized device. And so that was the source of that particular prediction. But I have had intuitions. I just don't know the real source of them. I mean, I wrote a book called Sexual Suicide in 1970-something, and predicted that the real crisis of the world would be depopulation rather than overpopulation. And that's probably my best prophecy ever. I mean, nobody expected it.
And it's happening
everybody
now.
Was predicting, a population bomb, a disaster of overpopulation. But the fact is, the real threat to the human race is depopulation resulting from sexual suicide. So this was really a pretty good call back in the 1960s and 70s. And today I'm doing time prices, which really transform economics. And I'm really excited with the discovery that money is time. And maybe I could use some water.
Yeah, there's some right there, exactly.
Yeah.
And so from what I understand from your that time theory is you don't look at prices in terms of money, but you use it in the amount of time we sacrifice in order to acquire those goods.
That's right.
So it's a completely different perspective.
The real price, the true price of anything is the number of hours of work you have to expend to buy it.
Okay.
And that measure obviates all the complexities of economic analysis summed up in consumer price indices, GDP deflators, purchasing power parities, all the ways that economists try to guess how different currencies relate to one another are transcended by the simple measure of how many hours you have to spend in order to acquire the money to buy anything. And this is hours, minutes, seconds, a universal measuring stick which can be applied to all problems of valuation. And this is, these are the true prices, as William Nordhaus sort of half got this idea. He really got the idea, and calls time prices the true prices, but then he didn't quite understand the full implications of it.
Based on that framework, how can you look at the economy today versus one of, say, 20 years ago? How are we doing on that?
We're doing fabulously better than than economists believe. Economists are all they're plunged deep into the dismal science again, and they think we're running out of stuff, and they think the climate is collapsing. They think that economies are stagnating, that innovation is slowing, all these beliefs, that interest rates are zero or below. All these beliefs are disproven by the use of true prices, which is essentially calculated by the nominal GDP, whatever it consists of, and the nominal average wage. You divide one into the other and you get a time price in hours and minutes and seconds, and they define the real values in the economy. And time prices show that we're in an era of tremendous technological and economic growth and prosperity.
Wow.
We have psychological problems, we have philosophical problems, we have terrible political perplexities, but economic growth is in a great boom, measured by the fact that the average worker every year has to spend less and less time to buy the goods and services that sustain his life. And thus he's released into doing all sorts of new inventive pursuits and opportunities. And I came from China a while back. I've been in China a lot because Life After Google was named the best social science book in China and a bestseller there, so I've been over there.
Doing the tour.
And everybody believes that the Chinese communists have been exaggerating the rate of economic growth in China. But when you estimate it by time prices, the amount of time an average Chinese has to spend to buy anything, Chinese growth has been drastically faster than the communist government claims. And China has been really an economic miracle, unprecedented, ever since its free zone strategy was adopted by Deng Xiaoping in the 1980s.
Okay, well, let's get into the book because there's fascinating stuff here, and you go pretty deep and pretty hard in on Google. I guess you're not going to be invited for Google Talks anytime soon.
Well, I keep getting told I'm going to be invited to Google Talks.
They might actually,
but they haven't done it. Okay. They won't do it.
Well, people are going to find out why soon.
Ray Kurzweil did, however.
He invited you.
No, Ray Kurzweil. I invited Ray to speak to my conference, and he gave a wonderful speech at my conference, COSM. In Seattle. But anyway.
All right. So anyways, and by the way, if anyone's coming in a little bit later, if they want to go ahead and look at this free investment report called Internet Reboots that we've talked about with your picks on the 5G technology stocks and some other things, they can click on the link below or go to londonreal.tv/reboot because you have some fascinating ideas when it comes to the investment. Talk about life after Google. You call it Silicon Valley's nervous breakdown, and you say that Google is not just a company, it's a system of the world. I think most people would agree it's ubiquitous, but they wouldn't see it the same way you do, George. How can you explain what the premise is of this?
Well, Google, I call it Google Marxism. And when you think about it, what was the real mistake Marx made, the profound error of Marxism? It was to believe that the Industrial Revolution was a kind of final human achievement, that after the Industrial Revolution, the problem of abundance had been solved, and production was consummated, and the only issue politically was how to distribute the existing abundance. And in other words, he believed that the Industrial Revolution, all those looms and factories and railroads and all the inventions of that era were kind of a final thing, an eschaton. And Google's making the same error, that Silicon Valley is devoted to a similar Marxist mistake. It believes that machine learning, artificial intelligence, robotics, search engines, all biotech, all these breakthroughs of this era are kind of a final thing. And they're going to create machines that usurp human minds and transcend human minds, and all of us are going to be able to retire to tropical beaches while Brin and Page and the Google people fly off with Elon Musk to nearby planets, and machine learning and artificial intelligence inseminates the universe with ever more powerful machines that leave human beings far behind. And I think this is a delusional belief. And it actually has consequences. It results in real errors of policy and errors of business strategy.
Is this because there's a big echo chamber in the valley where people start to, you know, drink their own Kool-Aid and believe they are the masters of the universe and create their own destiny and drag us all along for the ride? Is that what's happening there?
I think it is a kind of delusional religion. I think it really derives from the sort of bottom-up theory that human beings are merely figments of evolution, of the product of a purely random and meaningless process, and that engineers can reproduce far better minds than this random process that's believed to be the source of human capabilities. And so they imagine they can design a better mind. And I've been, I just think this is a delusional belief, and it results in a whole industry focusing on replacing human beings rather than enhancing human beings. And I think that's a losing strategy. Human beings got to support this Silicon Valley venture. And if it's not enhancing their capabilities and expanding their opportunities and improving their lives, they aren't going to support it. And it's not going to work, because the fact is the human mind is the paramount manifestation of intelligence in the universe, and AI is just a machine that scarcely competes at all.
All right, and you're not impressed with the possibilities of that technology?
No, I am impressed with the possibilities of artificial intelligence, but it's just another step in the computer revolution that we've experienced for decades. And it's achieved tremendous breakthroughs. I mean, artificial intelligence algorithms can now determine protein folds, which are a crucial process in biology, far more effectively than unaided researchers can determine protein folds. Every DNA programs proteins. It assembles 23 amino acids into a variety of proteins. But DNA does not self-evidently show how to fold these proteins in all sorts of intricate shapes. And this has been a big obstacle to success in biotech. And this is an important breakthrough. AlphaFold came from Google, and it's a tremendous achievement, and I'm not denying it. But there's no intelligence in the way we conceive of intelligence in the human mind. The human mind is unique, and this is a machine. A machine is deterministic. Human intelligence manifests itself by unexpected ideas, by the capacity of imagination to conceive of counterfactuals or errors or new propositions that have never been entertained and don't spring from in any sort of predictable way from previous propositions. This is in information theory called entropy. It's unexpected bits, and all information is defined as unexpected bits. If a machine starts doing unexpected things, it's probably broken.
Right. So by definition, it will never have the creativity of a human.
Yeah.
And so by thinking that that is a future possibility, we're making a fatal flaw.
Yeah.
And this company is so ubiquitous in our lives that going down that path can be dangerous to us,
Yeah.
is what you're saying.
Yeah. Good summary.
What else about Google do we not see it? Like ways that it's in our lives that we don't recognize are potentially dangerous? Is it the big data? Is it the technology that goes with it? Is it the money? What is it?
You know, I really don't worry about Google.
Okay.
I mean, what I worry about today is this sort of mindless attack on Google that the Federal Trade Commission regards Google as a potential monopoly and is hobbling their prospects. And the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission doesn't like that Google is a meritocracy. They want it to follow all the rules of affirmative action. It doesn't like it that Google only hires the best computer scientists. And so the government and the culture are really attacking these great achievements, and which are just like the previous accomplishments of computer science, and summed up by IBM, for example. IBM was a giant that was attacked by the government as a potential monopoly. And
same with Microsoft.
What?
Same with Microsoft.
And Microsoft. They attack all these companies when they get big, and they're vulnerable when they're big, and the attacks just make them less effective, and almost always penalize their competitors more than their own potential. In other words, when the government enters a field with lawyers and bureaucrats and regulators, it makes that field less open and less full of opportunity for small companies and companies that might challenge Google. So Google now has come out against face recognition. Now Google's got face recognition beat. It accomplished face recognition pretty well some time ago, and face recognition is an important, vital technology. But Google's got it. So if it calls on all sorts of investigation and regulation of face recognition, who's going to be hurt? Google won't be hurt. All other companies that might challenge Google or develop better forms of face recognition or apply face recognition more inventively, they're the ones that will be suppressed by having new government regulation of a critical new human possibility.
Okay, so be careful when you go after these companies, because you might actually cut out the competitors.
Yeah, that's what you do.
That's what you
do. It's such a lesson of history. Many academics have noticed it, that the big established companies all kind of like regulation. They all kind of absorb the government into their business plans and use these rules as defenses against competition, as barriers to entry for opponents or rivals.
Now, also, a lot of things that Google offers you are free. How do you feel about free, and what should we be wary about when it comes to free?
Well, it's Google's strategy is aggregate and advertise. You assemble ever more customers, and then you advertise to them on the basis of data you collect from them through your search engines and other devices. And when you think of it, these ads, so-called, that Google is the master of propagating, aren't ads really, they're minuses. nobody wants to see them most of the time. They actually are value subtracted advertising. And so I worry about a business strategy that's based on giving people what they don't want. And this is particularly acute with mobile ads. Mobile ads, pop-up ads on your smartphone take some 30% of the bandwidth and 30% of your costs of your bandwidth subscription is just to accommodate ads, and they slow down everything else, and they actually impair the functioning of your device. So I think Google faces a real challenge you know, the statistics are just amazing. You can only, I think it's 0.4% of ads are actually clicked. And of this 0.4%, half of them are clicked by mistake. And so the actual click-through rate is some tiny portion of the total volume of ads that's delivered. And so it's really a fiasco, and it fails the test that I expounded in Life After Television, before Life After Google, that in this future internet era, where the advertisers would be so well informed about just what you need and what you want, you'd never have to see any advertisements you didn't want to see anymore. And that is being thwarted, not just by Google's strategy, but also by this misunderstanding of what privacy is that's prevalent everywhere. Everybody thinks that privacy has something to do with anonymity. Privacy has to do with identity, and what we need is to have an internet with secure identities that have to be respected, not an internet that allows anonymity, which means an internet that fills up with clutter and criminality.
And what about free services like free email and free videos on YouTube, which is where we're being watched right now? Yeah. Well, what is the danger of getting free services and having these things that don't cost money?
Well, it just means that the vendors of these services don't have any real customers. It's all this feed the horses to feed the flowers, or to, it's all these circuitous ways to avoid having real customers to whom you owe something, and including a secure connection, and from whom you are constantly learning how to satisfy their needs better. So I think it's free goods are really, it's a deception. They've caused a lot of resentment, actually, because they place a focus on this collection of information, which is ordinarily perfectly acceptable, but which, when it's combined with free goods and lots of advertising that you don't want to see, it seems somehow a scandal. And but I think I'm for micropayments, I'm for ways of collecting money from particular customers. And I'm spending a lot of time in China, I noticed that the big China internet companies only get 10 to 15% of their revenues from advertising, while Google and Facebook get 90% and more of their revenues from advertising. And I think the American model is deeply vulnerable, and the idea that these American companies can be harassed and fined and litigated and sued constantly and subjected to these Byzantine privacy rules, such as the new California law that really defends the big companies, because small companies really have tremendous problems complying with the mass of specific and complex regulations. And yeah, they exempt some small companies, but in the end, if you are going to challenge the incumbents, you got to get sort of big. And as soon as you get big, you face this sudden onset of thousands of regulations, which are all based on technologies that are past, or political prejudices or misconceptions, and it's destructive.
Yeah, like you said, when something's free, it almost goes back to a barter economy, and then
Yeah, that's right.
and then you don't know what's on the other side in this case, and then also you're not a customer, so you don't feel like you have rights because you didn't pay for something. So who is the customer? It's not obvious. So the whole psychology of the transaction becomes flawed, and you almost don't have any more rights anymore. That's what you don't like about free. Right?
Good statement. Well put.
And the internet popularized it, and Google made it more popular than ever with free Gmail, free internet, free YouTube, free all of this stuff. And we haven't really properly thought out the ramifications of that. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and I also believe that these big companies can really launch all sorts of new projects and new businesses without any real commitment to whether they succeed or not. And capitalism thrives through a learning process. Economic growth is really learning. It's an increase of knowledge. That's what economic growth is about. And if you don't have any prices, you really miss that learning process. And so you become kind of a big sterile company like a government. And that's what I fear in Google, that they're launching self-driving cars and spaceships and live forever calico programs and not to mention all their searches and maps and everything else. But they don't have a real economic set of constraints from which they can learn by serving particular customers who pay them money. So I think that ultimately Google is hurt by its free strategy.
That's a fascinating way. You once said that you completely agree with Peter Thiel on the thesis that technology progress is not inevitable. It's the product of human creativity, which a lot of people would be surprised at. And you said if creativity didn't come as a surprise, we wouldn't need it, and socialism would work. Is this missed sometimes by people out there?
Yeah. Well, I think it is. Today, a lot of people in Washington actually imagine that we can't compete with the Chinese economy because the Chinese subsidize a lot of their companies, or the Chinese have top-down rules, and that Communist Party regulations that actually render them more potent competitors. The fact is that that's the big vulnerability of China. To the extent that the Communist Party really does interfere ever more deeply in their economy, they're the future of their enterprise is hurt. And today the biggest threat is the Communist Party is actually reaching down and forcing companies to fire their owner CEOs if they get uppity, if they seem to emerge as too important figures, like Jack Ma, who the founder chief of Alibaba, one of the great companies in world history is Alibaba, which made a tremendous contribution to Chinese growth. And Jack Ma is still a pretty young man, and he now works for some UN agency because allegedly because communist apparatchiks forced Alibaba's board to kick him out. Right. And that's a really alarming development. And there's several other leading business figures who've been forced out of their companies by political interference. And I think it's a real danger to China.
Right. So you need that creativity and the capitalism.
Yeah.
The capitalism has to be there because you must be rewarded with monetary gain for great ideas.
Yeah.
So it can't be in a free system of Google. That will retard it, and the socialism will retard it, and the communism does because, like you said, those outliers, they get quieted.
Yeah.
So they won't get the innovation they really need.
Yeah, I think that's right. I also think that it's important, crucial to my understanding of capitalism, is that capitalism is not primarily an incentive system. It's not a scheme of carrots and sticks, rewards and punishments, by which good behavior or profitable behavior is rewarded and mistakes are punished. That whole model is a sort of mechanistic model of the economy. And I believe that capitalism is chiefly not an incentive system, but an information system. And that wealth is chiefly knowledge. And you can see this if you realize that the Neanderthal in his cave, as Thomas Sowell wrote decades ago, has all the resources, all the material resources that we have today. The difference between our age and the Stone Age is not more resources, it's more knowledge. And that's what wealth really is. And growth is learning. And it's growth is the increase in knowledge. And the rules of learning are really defined by the scientific method. Ventures, business ventures, every business venture is the entrepreneurial test of an idea. And unless it can fail, it can't, unless it's falsifiable in terms of the scientific method, it can't succeed either. That's one of the problems with the Google strategy of depending entirely on these third parties who buy advertising. You have to be able to fail. When government tries to guarantee economic growth, it prohibits it because you can't guarantee an imaginative process of surprising creativity.
And then that idea can't stand on its own two legs, and you never know if it's real.
No.
And so, interesting, capitalism isn't about, like you said, carrots and sticks. It's not even about money. It's about information and the collection of great ideas. And that's what creates the wealth.
That's right.
But people miss that, and they see money in the capitalism.
Yeah.
But that's not correct.
No, that is not.
The invisible hand isn't about money. The invisible hand promotes a great idea.
Yeah. You know, this whole business should have failed a long time ago, this mode of argument. You can't really say that Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or whatever need billions and billions of dollars to motivate them to go to the office and pursue the expansion of Google. That's just wrong on its surface. They can.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.